Get out the insurance cards, get out the copays. The office is open, my friends. Brought to you by drroto.com.
What is up? Welcome in to another special off-season edition. We are the One and Done Show. We are your fast break of college basketball information. I am Eric Romoff. You can catch me on those Twitter streets at FantasyNav. And he is actually crossing off a lot of names on his big board, getting some more information with every passing day. The captain of our ship, Mike Holland. Mike, how's it going tonight? How's that big board looking?
It's looking good. I was hoping to cross a few more names off, but seems like we've been a little bit slower over the last few days, which is nice. Got a chance here to catch our breath. Teams are starting to take shape, but there's still some big fish that are out there. But big fish today for us, I'm just really excited. We get to talk about St. John's hoops with one of the best out there. So, let's not keep this guy waiting here, right? Let's go. Welcome to the show, college sports reporter for the New York Post, Zach Braziller. Zach, thank you for making some time out of your busy schedule. How are you doing tonight?
I'm all right, man. What's up, guys? How are you?
We're doing good. Thanks for making some time for us. Like Mike said, I think for me, the off season for St. John's has been outstanding. Right, they have added a ton of really quality pieces in the transfer portal. Specifically two guys in Jones and in Corbello that were in Mike's top 20. So maybe right off the top, Zach, can you tell us a bit more about how this decision played out? How important these pieces are, considering the loss of Champagny as he heads to the NBA.
Yeah, look, they were very significant. I went into this offseason saying I thought St. John's had to hit 2 home runs in the transfer portal if they were going to go into next year, with NCAA tournament expectations, and to me, they did. They got 2 guys in Corbello and Jones that are top 25 transfers in the in the portal. I know some people have them higher, lower, whatever, but they're 2 guys who, if they're right, are difference makers. Corbello is a tremendous point guard. I know he didn't have a great year last year, but he had a concussion. He missed 2 months. He's a kid who was, the Big Ten sixth man of the year as a freshman. And then you have Jones, who in his first full year of college last year for DePaul averaged almost 15 a game. He's a big time scoring wing, which is really what they needed. With Champagny and Aaron Wheeler moving on to the professional ranks, they became very thin on the wing, and that's what kind of where Jones fits in. And I think their offseason was very good for 2 reasons. It was very good because they brought these 2 guys in, and I also thought it was very good because of the continuity. They're one of only 10 schools not to lose a scholarship player to the transfer portal. That's, to me, was very significant when you consider the year before where they lost so many guys and, they just never quite gelled with such a new team this year. So, yeah, I think it's been a great offseason for them. It really has. I did not expect them to have a roster that, at least on paper, looked as good as it does. I figured Wheeler and Champagne were gone. I didn't know what they were going to bring in, and I think St. John's fans have to be very happy with this offseason.
Yeah, there certainly is a ton of things to like about how this offseason has unfolded, and you also mentioned the ability to maintain a lot of the roster for this team. So these are guys that Mike and I absolutely loved covering throughout the entirety of last season, but maybe for someone that's a little bit less familiar with the program or someone that's kind of, looking from the outside in, what's something that you can tell them about this team, this program, these coaches that might not be as readily apparent on the surface level?
I think one guy who's clearly going to be key going into next year is Rafael Pinzon. He was a 3-star recruit as a freshman, and they had pretty high hopes for him going into last year, and it just never kind of materialized because he broke his finger. Then he got COVID, and there were complications where he missed almost 2 full months after getting COVID, so it really messed up his season. And he was a guy that I thought really could help. He's a big guard. He's about 6'5". He can shoot. He's smart. He's going to be, the big question with them going into next year is going to be, can they shoot enough from the perimeter? They're clearly going to be a team that's got athletic, that's going to be athletic. That's going to be tough in transition. But the shooting aspect is a real question mark, and he's going to be a huge part of that. I think you have a guy like Dylan Adewusu, who's now going to kind of go back into being more of an off-the-ball player with Curbelo and Posh Alexander there, and he's a guy who's been able to show he can shoot the ball. But that is a major question. Can this team be a better, can this team shoot the ball well enough from three in a half-court setting? Because you lose Champagne and you lose Wheeler, who are really their two best shooters last year, or at least two of their three best. I think Wusu might have had a higher percentage. But that's, really going to be a question mark. But I think, Pinzon or Wusu are two guys that I really can see, having a big role just in terms of guys shooting the ball from the perimeter.
It makes a lot of sense. So also, you mentioned it, Posh Alexander is expected, obviously, to man the point again this year. He's turned into, I believe, is an all Big East caliber type player. He's heading into his junior year now, the first one without Champagne. So we kind of want to know here, is this his team now, or what kind of role is he going to play with Curbelo coming in?
Yeah, no, look, that's another really big question for this team is you now have two guys who like to play with the ball in their hands. You have Posh and you have Curbelo, and look, they're not necessarily friends, but they do know each other. That Curbelo played best locally at Long Island Lutheran, and Posh was at our Savior Lutheran in the Bronx. So you have two guys who are at least familiar with each other. I wouldn't say they're friends, but they know each other. And you look at the best teams in the country. A lot of these teams have 2 point guards. Now the question is, shooting the ball wise, because neither one of these guys is necessarily a shooter. Now, as a freshman, Posh shot the ball better when he was playing with another point guard. Now, that's one thing St. John's is very hopeful of is, him not having to handle the ball quite as much maybe could really help him and get more out of that shot. But it's a huge question is how are these guys going to do together? They're like, I don't know the answer. I don't think anyone knows the answer. It's going to be very fascinating. I wouldn't say it's Posh's team. I would say it's kind of all three guys. I think it's Posh, it's Curbelo, and David Jones. This is going to be a big three. These are the three guys that are really going to carry them. There are obviously some other significant players. Joel Soriano, who really got better a lot last year, is one. I mentioned Pinzon. I mentioned Wusu. Montez Mathis, a senior, is another guy. But it's really going to be about those three guys. That's going to be their big three. Those guys are going to have to do a lot of the scoring, and they're going to have to be leaders for this team.
Yeah, that's certainly going to be the case. One thing that you mentioned there is that we might be looking at kind of more of a big three kind of deployment for this team, and there is no shortage of depth and options for guys that can fill that role. Another thing that you mentioned a bit earlier is how this St. John's team has really maintained its core. It's one of, I believe, 10 or so programs that hasn't lost anyone to the transfer portal. So with so much turnover just in the ranks in general, and specifically with the Big East loading up with new faces via the transfer portal, what sort of advantage does that give the St. John's team? And what has Coach Anderson done to really maintain this core group of guys?
I definitely think it's an advantage when you consider, so many teams, are going to have new faces and new guys and, new leaders. I definitely think it helps. And they're also, there's talk, it hasn't been announced yet, but they're expecting to go on on an overseas tour where you play exhibition games in August sometime. I've heard either the Dominican Republic or Barbados. And that's another, that'll be another thing to help. The team really last year didn't gel, really until late. And even then it was, they kind of didn't really gel. So I definitely think it helps. I mentioned Pinzon. There was another freshman last year, Omar Stanley, who, had some bright spots, but I think a full off season will clearly help him. You obviously have Soriano. You have Isaiah Niwe, who was a guy who kind of came on late and they're pretty high on. I think it always helps. Continuity always helps. I don't like the idea of continuity for the sake of continuity, but I do think you have some good players who are going to be a lot more comfortable next year. And I just keep on going back to Pinzon. I think he's a guy that's going to be so key for this team. And I thought not having him for most of the year really hurt them because they were a team that really could have used at times another scoring guard. And he, not having him really hurt. And, it's going to be obviously a really big year for him, a really big year for this entire program that really needs to get into the NCAA tournament. And I think this offseason probably went as well as possible.
Yeah, definitely feels like it from the outside looking in. To the other question there, anything you can tell us about how Coach Anderson has managed to keep this group of guys together? Does he have a secret sauce?
I mean, you look at it. Look, they're two probably their two best scorers went to the professional ranks. And then you're talking about a lot of young guys. Pinzone is a young guy who's he's from Puerto Rico, but he's played high school on Long Island. His high school teammate Drissa Traore, the same thing, played high school here on Long Island. Andre Curbello's came here to kind of play with them. So I mean, I think there really wasn't a huge pool of guys who are going to leave. A lot of these guys are local guys who, I think if you saw maybe a down year next year, you could see some guys leaving. I guess I was a little surprised. I thought maybe one or two guys would leave, but look, they clearly made some changes into the way they operate, ran things after last year when so many guys left. Now, it's also important to know a lot of those guys who left were not brought in by Mike Anderson. This entire roster now is brought in by Mike Anderson. A few of the guys who had left were not his guys. Greg Williams, Josh Roberts, Marcellus Earlington were holdovers from the Mullen era. So I think you have to clearly take that into account as well.
So, Zach, I want to ask you about a piece that you wrote in early March, right after the loss to Villanova in the Big East tournament. There were some questions there about consistency, like discipline, failure to turn this talented roster into a tournament team. So for me, these expectations are going to be pretty high this year. You have this big three and a bunch of guys returning here. How much pressure is there on Coach Mike Anderson this year and, to produce? And what's the bar for success, he needs to surpass going forward?
Look, they got to get in the tournament here. I mean, this is now his fourth season, and I felt he did a really good job his first 2 years. I really did. I thought he, overachieved. I think this past year he didn't do a good job. I thought he, for whatever reason, it just took him way too long to kind of settle on his best combinations, on his best rotation, and I didn't think he maximized his roster. Now, let's see what he does this year, because look, bringing in these transfers is clearly raising the bar now. Where to me, it's a team that absolutely could make the NCAA tournament. He's got to get in the tournament. This is his fourth year right now. I don't know if he's necessarily going to lose his job if he doesn't get in this year. I mean, I believe he's still under contract for maybe 3 or 4 more years. I know he got an extension after last year, but at some point you got to get into the tournament. And to me, this is a team, while there are questions about shooting and how Posh and Curbelo are going to match, are going to do together, it's clearly a team that has enough talent to make the tournament. And it's his job to, if there's shooting issues, to kind of mask those or at least alleviate them a little. And he's got to get the most out of Posh and Curbelo together. It's not going to be easy. I mean, the league is good. You're now going to probably have a new leading scorer with Jones in the fold. But to me, he's got a team that I actually think this roster might fit him a little better. I think they're a little more athletic when you consider some of the guys they brought in, whether it's Jones, whether it's Curbelo, whether it's a top 75 freshman, AJ Storr, who's a terrific athlete. I actually think this roster might fit him a little more, fit his style a little better. So we'll see. I mean, I was really bullish on this team last year. I thought they were a tournament team. I thought they were a team that could win a game in the tournament, and it just didn't materialize. So I'm not, I'm going to wait to see. But I think this team at least has the potential to be a tournament team.
Yeah, you mentioned Coach Anderson's ability to maximize on his roster. With this new look roster, I mean, the idea of maximizing on this group of guys, absolutely puts them in contention in my book. So certainly a storyline to watch. I guess kind of zooming out a little bit, obviously we can't talk about the state of college athletics these days without talking about NIL. So I wanted to get from your point of view, how is this program, adjusting to the new NIL landscape? And is there anything specifically about the New York media market that maybe gives St. John's an edge?
Yeah, I wouldn't say an edge. I mean, New York is a pro town. But look, there are opportunities. Last year, Champagny had, he had a few different deals. I think he made around $30,000 for the year, which is, nothing to sneeze at. But look, the big schools where they're the only show in town, Lexington, Kentucky with Kentucky, Carolina, Duke, those are still the schools that are going to, LSU, those are still the places that are going to probably benefit the most because they're the biggest brands, because they're the only show in town. In New York, you have all these pro athletes, you have all these celebrities, but I do think it's an opportunity, to at least, make things happen and to at least benefit somewhat. Now, we'll see how it kind of unfolds. And I do know St. John's is doing certain things. They partnered with Boardroom, the Kevin Durant company. There's a new startup that of local St. John's fans and businesses that are trying to help. So they're clearly looking to make inroads and get into that arena, which they have to. You really do. So we'll see in time, but nothing crazy. But I do think there are some opportunities for players. I think Curbelo will do okay. I think David Jones should have a chance to do some things. I think Posh, I know he does a few things on a minor scale. I'm sure Posh will have more opportunities as well, and we'll see how it unfolds here.
All right, Zach. Yeah, before we get you out of here, I appreciate your time. Obviously, I got to ask you though: do we buy our St. John's gear here? And is Coach Anderson, this roster, going to take down the Big East and make a run of the tournament this year?
Look, I think they're clearly have a team that is capable of making the tournament. I don't think there's any question about it. Like I mentioned, there are clearly some major question marks going into next season. I think the roster is more or less set now. They're not, barring a surprise defection, they have all 13 scholarships filled. And look, to me, it's going to come down to two things. It's going to come down to how good that big three, can play together. And then it's going to be, can they shoot enough? Can they make enough shots? Do Curbelo, Jones, and Posh mesh well enough? And then can you get enough shooting from whether it's Posh improving, whether it's Wusu, whether it's Pinzone, whether it's AJ Storr, who, people are kind of forgetting. I mean, he's on paper, he's the best recruit Mike Anderson has brought in since he's got to St. John's. He was a 4-star, top 75 kid. He's a big-time athlete. He can shoot a little too. So we'll see. But I do think there is clearly the potential for this to be a tournament team and to be a team that finishes in the top half of the league.
Fantastic. Zach Braziller, thank you very much for spending some time with us here this evening. Nobody out there has their finger on the pulse of this St. John's program quite like you do. If you want to be better informed about this program, definitely get over to Twitter. His handle is @NYpost_Braziller without the R. Or you can always read his work over at nypost.com. Zach, thank you again for your time and for getting us up to speed on the Red Storm.
Hey, my pleasure, guys. Be well, all right?
Thank you, Zach.
Take care. So, Mike, as we rounded out last week's conversation, we were taking a bit of a West Coast spin, and we're going to keep that theme alive. What is the latest news in the Pac-12?
Yeah, it seems like once we start, we can't stop, right? So, I think it's interesting. After we talked about it, just looking at kind of what's happened here with some of these guys, it's pretty interesting from the Pac-12 kind of spinning down. Some down transfers here. You have, Cal's Andre Kelly, really productive forward for Cal, deciding to take his talents to UC Santa Barbara into that mid-major realm. And then you see Stanford's Jaden Dallaire go the mid-major route, although a little bit stronger mid-major. Obviously, you've got Gonzaga in the West Coast Conference, but he chose to go to San Diego and play for the new coach there, Steve Lavin, formerly of Fox Sports. So it's definitely interesting to see, these guys kind of choose to go this route. I think for Andre Kelly, it's he should absolutely dominate the Big West, right? I mean, you look at it and he had 13 points and almost 9 rebounds a game last year. So you would definitely expect him to challenge for double-doubles on a nightly basis. For him, I think it's just a case of, wanting to win. I mean, you look at it here, Cal 51 and 105 over that same span. You're looking at a UC Santa Barbara team that has 4 straight 21 seasons. They were 17 and 11 last year. So he's definitely looking to win, and definitely an interesting route, and should have a nice season there. Whereas someone like Dallaire, he's still in the draft, but the expectation is that he's going to come back to school. I think Steve Lavin's making some moves here in his first year, and I think San Diego is definitely going to be a team to watch. He's a good shooter, definitely someone that's going to be able to put up some points for this team. So, looking at these guys from a DFS outlook, I mean, they look pretty good. If, they're in that 7 to 8K range, you're probably going to want to fire these guys up, every time they're kind of on these slates. And if they're any less than that, you're just going to have to lock them in. So what are your thoughts on these two guys, kind of spinning down here?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised at all if we see them below that 7 or 8K range for the first couple weeks of the season, right? I'll say it again. I'm not all that hopeful or all that high on the various DFS platforms out there being really quick to adjust to some of the new faces in new places in college basketball. So a couple more names for you to write down in the copious notes that you're certainly keeping out there. I am a little bit curious with regard to Kelly. It seems like we've seen a handful of guys that were at some of the larger programs out there, and this year they transferred to a smaller school that is closer to home. Does Kelly have any Santa Barbara ties, or is this really just about an opportunity to win?
Yeah, from all accounts, it seems like the opportunity to win here, an opportunity to really show out. I mean, he's going to be the best player on the floor a lot of the nights. You can kind of get overshadowed in a Pac-12 where you're not really winning any games. You can be the best player on the floor, but if you're not winning, it almost seems like, it's just you're just the best player putting up stats on the worst team. So I think he's got a nice opportunity here. It's going to be kind of fun to follow how his career goes here in his final year. So definitely interesting to see. And not a bad job here by Steve Lavin. So he's definitely cooking it up in his first off season.
Yeah, it's fun to see some of these head coaches take advantage of kind of past celebrities. So San Diego, definitely a program on the rise. And Kelly there at UC Santa Barbara should be a usage monster. So again, jot both of these names down as names to watch because we will be likely firing them up in the early parts of the season. Now that we have spent a little time on the Best Coast, we'll head back into the Heartland and get an update on the Big Ten. What's the latest there?
Yeah, so a team that I wanted to touch on is Penn State. We haven't talked a ton of Big Ten. A lot of guys transferring out of the Big Ten, it feels like. But Penn State landed a couple of our top 100 transfers. Yeah, you get the guard Andrew Funk out of Bucknell. Have him rated at number 91. And then you get the guard Cameron Winter out of Drexel, who we have rated 94th. So they both come in from mid-majors, so going the opposite way, right, that we just talked about. And it's definitely something that Penn State needs is guys that can score. That was something that was really missing from this team last year. This team really relied on Jalen Pickett, and then our guy in the DFS circle, John Harrar, who was just beasting down low. Well, he's gone, but guess who returns? Jalen Pickett. So, it's going to be interesting to see, how we're going to deploy some of these guards as they're going to be pretty experienced in the backcourt with Penn State. Andrew Funk, the Bucknell team was really young. I think they had like 7 guys that were like either redshirt freshmen or freshmen on their team last year. And, him putting up 18 points a game, still made second team Patriot League. But, I think he's got an opportunity to really kind of stretch the floor here, which is something that Penn State's desperately needed. And then Cameron Winter, man, if you put on the tape, man, he's someone that can get into the paint. He can create. He's another premium ball handler that can go along with Pickett, so that's going to ease some of the pressure off of him. While these aren't, considered top 25 guys like we talked about in Jones and Curbelo, these are pretty nice pieces that are coming over and really shaping out to be a really nice backcourt for the Nittany Lions here. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, pour one out for Harrar. He was certainly one of our favorite plays, and it was never particularly pretty, but he had the volume, he had the usage to get it done. And with him transitioning out, with these 2 new guards coming in, it feels like this is going to be an entirely new Penn State scheme that they're running here, right? So, at least for me, on its face, this is probably one that's going to be a bit of a wait and see. If we see either of them come in, Funk or Winter, it just laughably low price tags in the DFS game. Obviously, they're worth a dart throw or 2, but it feels like this is going to be a program in transition for a good chunk of the start of next season. So my plan is to kind of sit back and wait.
Yeah, definitely. I think one guy that we can count on with Pickett is going to be Seth Lundy. We fired him up a little bit last year. Just on the macro level, I expect him to, to really kind of develop here. Got that outside shot. Can do some rebounding for you. But I think the key thing here for Penn State too is they're also bringing in a pretty solid recruiting class, 25th in the 24/7 composite rankings. They're bringing in four-star Kiba Najee, who is the crown jewel of their recruiting class. So a really nice player here. I think ESPN has him in the top 100. So definitely a player that's going to kind of slot in here. A nice shot blocker, can rebound, has a little bit of an offensive game here. Going to kind of take over for the Harar world now. How much he's able to produce at the next level, remains to be seen. As you said, it's going to kind of be a little bit of a wait and see approach. I think, your stalwarts here are going to be Jalen Pickett, who we saw dominate last year for this team, and then Seth Lundy. So with those two guys and then bringing in these new guys and these new freshmen, I think they're an interesting team, potential surprise, like top half type team in the Big Ten, but it's all going to come down to how these teams gel, just like most of the transfers that are, going to these new teams.
Yeah, you mentioned the incoming recruiting class, and it is time for our obligatory reminder that the transfer portal is not the only way that teams acquire players. We do still have kids signing in from the high school ranks, and National Signing Day is wrapping up here in a little bit more than a week. So, Mike, you've put together some of your thoughts on the incoming class and some of the headliners therein. Why don't you give everyone an overview of this recruiting class that is on their way into their respective campuses?
Yeah, so I think the top two classes here, not just by volume, but by just pure talent on average here, they're both bigger classes, but Duke and Arkansas, man, they are bringing in some major talent, some NBA talent. They combine here for 7 composite 5 stars on 24/7, and then 5 4 stars. So, definitely an interesting kind of watch here to see how Duke and Arkansas are going to play. We saw Duke with a very young team last year. Arkansas is going to be bringing in a bunch of transfers here. Some guys that we have in the top 100, a lot of front court players. So it's going to be interesting to see how this 6-man recruiting class comes in for the Arkansas team. But, you have to start with Duke, right? If you look at 24/7 composite, the first 3 players listed are all committed to Duke here. So it's the big man here, Derek Lively. Man, absolutely athletic. They have him number 1 on the composite. He's an elite defender. He's a screen and roll guy. He's going to make headlines here, taking over from Mark Williams. You got Dariq Whitehead, who's a wing out of Florida. He's a lethal slasher. He can score from all 3 levels. An elite defender. And then Kyle Filipowski, who should have been a McDonald's All-American, but was absolutely slighted here. Finishes up at number 3 on 24/7. He's a point forward type, can handle the ball, but can really stretch the floor. So it's going to be nice to see Filipowski and Lively playing that front court together, because they're going to be pretty dynamic. And then another McDonald's All-American, Mark Mitchell. He's ranked as the 20th best player. He's a high-energy, versatile forward. He does a lot of his damage around the rim. So just a bunch of exciting guys coming in here. And then you look at the Arkansas side, their 3 5-stars are no slouches either. Nick Smith is probably the best guard in the high school ranks. He's an explosive athlete, a really good playmaker, can score from all 3 levels. Anthony Black is super interesting, 6'7" point guard. Man, that's going to be pretty tough on pick and rolls, right? And the length on defense too. These 2 guys in the backcourt are going to be pretty fun to watch. And then, Jordan Walsh, someone that kind of exploded here towards the end of last year. He's number 18 on the 24/7 composite. He's a hybrid type forward. He's more of an elite defender. Can get out in transition, get you some buckets. He's still developing on offense, but you just look at these crop of guys coming to these teams, and man, depending on pricing in the DFS world, we're going to have to kind of pick and choose, plug and play, and see how these guys kind of develop. And then, just on a macro level for the team, right? It's how quickly can these guys gel? How quickly can they transition from the high school ranks to the college ranks? It's really going to determine the outcomes for these 2 teams. So any thoughts on these 2 top classes coming in?
Yeah, a couple, right? What's old is new again. Duke has a elite recruiting class coming in, right? So obviously Coach K is wandering off into retirement, but the program and the legacy he built there lives on, as represented by the strength of this recruiting class. Specifically of these Duke recruits, I mean, this Whitehead edition he is the quintessential Duke player in my mind. He's super versatile. They can really use him in a variety of different ways. And yet again, as they are stacked with talent, they're probably going to have to find a way to get creative with the pieces they have. And he seems like one of those players that can be used in a number of different ways and deliver value to this team. So he'll be a player that I will be watching. For those of you that are watching us on YouTube, couple of things: scroll on down, hit that like button and that subscribe button if you are not already, and then get into those comments and let us know which team's recruiting class you think is the strongest. Mike outlined Duke and Arkansas. Do you agree? Do you like your alma mater? Do you like someone else? Let us know in the comments. We'll keep the conversation going there, and we will keep our conversation going here with some final news and notes. Who are the last guys that you are keeping an eye on? Anything else that you need to update the subscribers and viewers to? Anything that they should keep an eye out for in the days or weeks to come?
Yeah, so just a couple of final things here. Big-time scorer, Antoine Davis. He's returning to Detroit. So he was number 25 on our transfer board, but looks like he's coming back. Man, he has a chance to finish as the number 2 scorer in the history of NCAA basketball if he keeps his averages. So definitely going to be a lot of fun. Don't know how much we're going to get to play him on DFS slates, but if he is on one, I guarantee I'm playing him. I want to be a part of history. But yeah, that's pretty awesome, though, sticking with the mid-major here. That's kind of been a theme, too. From the past few days here, we saw, big-time shot blocker, the 7'5" Jamarian Sharp from Western Kentucky. Man, a lot of teams wanted this guy. Wow, he popped on the team. This guy's just absolutely swatting things left and right, but flirted with Missouri, but coming back to Western Kentucky. You look at, the guards here, Khalil Shabazz coming back to San Francisco, a really good scorer. And they also get the Texas A&M transfer Marcus Williams. He's going to need a waiver since it's his second time transferring in as many years. But a nice little backcourt here for San Francisco, who we saw in the NCAA tournament do some things. And then Coastal Carolina guard Rudy Williams. He's actually going to be headed to BYU. He's our 59th ranked player, so a really nice pickup for BYU. Definitely going to be a bucket getter for them. So someone we'll be playing a lot in the DFS ranks. And then, we talked a little bit about, the Duke and Arkansas recruiting classes. Working on a little piece here that, will drop just after signing day. Some thoughts on the overall top classes, some impact classes that may be a little bit smaller, and then just taking a dive into a few teams that are, in the mid-majors that, I think could make some noise as freshmen. So definitely look forward to that. And, just excited to see where this week's going to take us.
Yeah, a lot of exciting news and interesting names that continues to trickle in day over day with these guys that you laid out here, Davis, Sharp, Shabazz, right? Super exciting players that I want to have the opportunity to fire up and roster in DFS. So that means next year I'll probably be wading into the showdown and the late slates a little bit more than I did in last year. But ultimately, to get exposure to these guys, certainly feel like it's worth it. You teased your article coming out here on drroto.com. Again, we have signing day coming up on the 19th. So that should be coming out right around that time, and it will help you not only get a good look at the Duke and Arkansas classes, but a better understanding of this incoming recruiting class as a whole, make you a sharper player as we head into the 22-23 season. And the other way to do just that is to stick at drroto.com, get yourself subscribed and signed up, get into our members-only Discord, and let's get this bread.
Thanks for stopping by the office. Get your fantasy prescription by subscribing to the channel and checking out drroto.com. And until the next visit, be well and take care.